Hopefully you guys had a good week. I know it's kind of right in the middle. It's probably testing season as far as state assessments for you guys. I know it is for us here. Um, so I told you last week, we're going to kind of get in tonight. This is where some of the overlap occurs. I spoke about that at the beginning of the semester. We'll have, about midway through, we'll be overlapping. I'll already start talking about CBMs when you're really just on the back end of norm reference. So we're going to get into a little bit of that tonight, but I kind of want to go back really quick and review some norm reference information, see if you have questions on that. Debbie brought up something I was going to mention to you guys that I can share as a resource for you. So on your norm reference, she's asking about charts and graphs. And if you noticed on the syllabus, guys, I want to point this out to you because a lot of students tend to just look right over this. It mentions on the rubric for this assignment to include a bell curve on it. So that will be one of your tables, charts, and graphs, making sure you have the bell curve. And I mentioned to Debbie that for the purpose of this assignment, a lot of people don't have access to a particular bell curve where they can go in there and plug their information in. So they literally have went in and created their own and drawn it and then took a picture of it and imported it or uploaded it into the report. I told her that I had located a bell curve basically it's a Google spreadsheet that has the bell curve on the top, and then down below for I use the WJ4 a lot. I have two tabs. One tab is for the cognitive that I administer for the within the WJ4, and the other is for the achievement side of it. And so each one of them, it has all the subtests under it. So literally you can just go and plug in your standard scores or Steinons, have whatever data you want to put in, and it will plot it up above in that bell curve.
Okay.
You can literally copy that image and paste it right over into your report. So after tonight's meeting, I will download a copy of that as a resource and drop it over into SPED 805 resources. And literally, you can use that in the future. If you needed to create a bell curve, you could change up the title of achievement or cognitive, whatever you want to do. But I included on my comprehensive reports. I got it off Teachers Pay Teachers website when I was looking for a particular visual to use. Told Debbie I think it cost me $1.99 to do it, but I can drop that over into 805 resources if you guys need to use that for the norm reference assessment report. Okay, it'd be easier way to do it perhaps than versus maybe drawing it by hand and trying to copy it and get it over in there. So is everyone doing all right so far up to this point on your norm reference report? Are you running into any challenges? Any questions you may have that I can answer for you?
I just need to sit down and start writing.
Excuse me?
I just need to sit down and start writing.
Together? Okay. Yeah, thank you. Question?
Yeah, Dr. Posey, I have a question. So I checked with my psychologist. Actually, she told me there's none of the assessment that she can share with me because it looks like she doesn't have K-math and she has something else. And she said it's like a software and she is authorized to access into that test questions, and she couldn't share with me. So I was doing SSAT because SSAT, I know that SSAT is also a kind of like norm reference assessment. Will that be okay with you?
Yes. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you have trouble with that, or you're not getting the information you need, remember I have that other resource, the testing lab video that you could use for this assignment if you needed it.
Yeah, because for me, those school resource teacher, we don't do assessment. So that's not our duty. So that means, so even our department chair, and she doesn't have the resource to access to assessments,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So it'll work if you have access to it. And if not, remember you have the video to fall back on, and I've got the comprehensive report that goes with it in the examples of the assessment reports. So I can go over that with you if we need to, if you do end up using that. So if it comes to that, just let me know and I'll be glad to meet with you and review that information. But it sounds like you have a plan there and I'm good with that.
All right, thank you. So do you mean the video is in the video is in the resources file folder?
The testing lab video,
Yeah.
I have a testing lab video over there, and I also have a copy of the comprehensive report in the section
Oh,
where the assessment report examples. You know, I listed an example for you for the informal, the norm
yeah, I
reference.
read that.
Yeah,
The sample report, I
yeah,
read that. Thanks.
yeah.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions?
I do have a question about FastBridge that I know it said something in our instructions about who can administer, but we can administer that. So can we still use that? I mean, we don't have it doesn't take a specialist.
On that, it doesn't. So like FastBridge is you know, it's a software based, and so a lot of schools use that for benchmarking purposes and different reasons like that. So along with, you know, I gave a couple examples when we first started talking about the norm reference that there would be some you could access that you don't necessarily have to lot specialized credentialing for. One of them was the NWEA MAP test, which is considered a norm reference. Also, I mentioned the STAR reading and math is considered a norm reference test. Law schools use it for benchmarking purposes. So FastBridge would be one. So you'd be able to access the data and pull that for reporting purposes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, I want to pull up the rubric really quick and go over it with you. Give me just a second here and we'll get over to it and make sure everyone so yeah, please remember that you'll need to make sure you include the visual, the table chart and graph that has a bell curve in it. A lot of times that's one component time to get over. They just don't realize that's there. They just miss the rubric. Scrolling down here, I'll get to it in just a second. Okay, so again, I want to mention when we do the report, a lot of the components in the report are going to be the same as what you did for the informal. It's going to have the identifying information, what you're going to talk about, you know, include the name of the test, give a test date that was administered, skills being measured, purpose, and the reason why it's selected, the background. So if you're using the same student for all your assessments, I mentioned to you early on in the course, you can use that same background section. You don't need to go and reinvent the wheel and create a new one for the same student. Okay, so just copy that and drop it in there. Test results, interpretation. Okay, this is where we get into, and it talks about the bell curve right here on your analysis of results. So we're going to present the data that you get in tables, charts, and graphs. Okay, then explicit analysis. So that's very similar to what you did on the informal, but says explain the performance in comparison to peers using a bell curve. So that's going to be considered one of your tables, charts, and graphs. On that, when you do the normed reference on the assessments, a lot of the assessments have a lot of information. Okay, for the purpose of this report, I wouldn't get consumed with trying to report all the data. For this assignment, I would concentrate, pick out 2 to 3 what you feel like are 2 to 3 weak areas that you identify with that student. There may be multiple areas because the reports provide a lot of information. Okay? But for this assignment, just pick out 2 to 3 and concentrate on those for the report. Okay. Support all your conclusions that you get from the data. from the assessment. Make sure you support the conclusions. Also highlighting their strengths, what you feel like are the strengths that you found from the normed reference test results, not from the informal. We're just pulling the strengths that you identified, their high scores, the norm reference, and then also you're going to highlight what you feel like are their weaknesses based on the data in this report. Okay, so each time that could vary somewhat. Okay, then we're going to drop down summary and conclusion. It's very similar. Nothing really has changed here. Very similar to what you did on informal. You're going to tie your findings with the background of the student, provide a brief summary of their overall performance, and outline some screening and evaluation decisions based on data from this norm reference. Okay, then just kind of highlight some instructional planning recommendations based on the data. Okay, what would you recommend or suggest to implement for instructional purposes for this student? Okay, again, it could be going in and modifying the content, dropping grade level down a little bit. If you need to drop their materials down a grade level to help them be successful, and just make sure you kind of back it up with data that you collected from the assessment. Okay, make sure, even if it's the same student, make sure you include your permission form as part of the report. Okay, even if it's the same kiddo. And then developing a lesson plan based on the information from the norm reference only. Okay, not pulling anything from the informal. We're going to develop a lesson plan based on what you feel like are the weaknesses identified that you need to target based on the data you collected from the norm reference.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we're using the sample one that is in the course shell, how do we use the parent permission form for that?
Okay. So what you'll need to do on that, if you're using my testing lab video, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
And then you're using my comprehensive. So what you'll need to do is just take a blank permission form template and on there write, just list testing lab video provided by Dr. Posey.
Okay.
That's all you got to do. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just make sure you just get a blank one and write that little note on there and include it and you'll be good. All right. Any other question before we kind of slide over to CBMs? Talk about those. Make sure everyone's good with this. Sounds like you guys are on the right track and everything's going well. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share on the rubric here and I'll go over to course shell. We'll kind of talk about CBM a little bit. Internet's really slow switching over. I don't know why. So when you need it to be quick, it's slow. Give me just a minute. Seems like it's slow getting switched over here. We're gonna get there eventually. Wanted to share a few slides off of the deck that really targets the CBMs. I think we're in business now. It's pulling up. Yeah, here we go. Right, I think we're good to go. Okay, so I'm going back. This particular slide deck shares both CBM and informal. So I'm kind of backtracking just for the purpose of talking a little bit about CBMs, kind of their purpose, what they do, what we're going to be looking for. So frequency measurement, basically it monitors, it's an instrument that monitors student progress frequently. And so part of this assignment that we're going to slide into after the norm of reference is we're asking you to try to acquire at least 6 data points. You literally could do this, a CBM ongoing for an entire semester. Excuse me, you could use it all the way through an entire school year if you wanted to. For the purpose of the course, we're doing a condensed version. We'd like for you to get 6. But so you monitor their progress frequently, compare to see if they're making adequate progress. You're plotting data points, and if you see a lot of inconsistencies, ups and downs, that tells you, hey, we need to look at this. The grade level content could be too high, especially if after you establish a base. And once you establish your base, all your data points are going in a downward trajectory, you know, without a doubt, you need to modify the content or drop it back a grade level. It's over the student's head. Okay? It's a good way to come up with achievement goals for a given year. And it also lets you know on an ongoing basis, depending on how frequently you do this as the classroom teacher or the resource room teacher, if the students making adequate progress. Okay, and by plotting these data points, it gives you a great visual and lets you see if it's continuous upward trend or if we're seeing inconsistencies, highs and lows, or a downward trend. It helps you to make ongoing adjustments throughout the year. We obviously don't want to not monitor and assume the student is understanding and making progress, when yet in turn, the longer we go, the further behind they're getting. Okay, so there's a reason why you would want to do this. Gives you a very quick, accurate, up-to-date visual students progressing. Okay, so we look at effective CBMs. I gave you guys a resource. I don't know how many of you checked it out. You may have already had your own that you're comfortable with. EasyCBM.com has a lot of resources on there by content subject area. So looking at effective CBMs, basically one, measure or have sufficient reliability and validity, and they can be used in a confident manner by the classroom teacher to help make some educational decisions. Okay. It's also, they're easy to use and they're easy to understand. Okay, they don't take really a lot of time. You can, depending on the complexity of the one that you have selected, you can go in and do it perhaps in less than 5 minutes. Okay, so easy to use, easy to understand, easy for teachers to employ in the classroom. The results that you get from that, they're easy to explain to others, perhaps to coworkers or colleagues that serve the student, or even parents, or your building level principal, or your director, okay? And they can be used frequently throughout the school year, oftentimes very inexpensive. Okay, I talked to you about the probe that you're going to use for that assignment, about, you know, whether it's a math or a reading or vocab words or whatever it may be. Your initial one, you might want to change it around, maybe not totally change your words, all that, but change the order of the items listed on the probe so they're not able to memorize that. But you can certainly shift the order that they're in, change it up a little bit based on grade level, but you want to try to use a probe that's very similar. Okay, so it's consistent. Okay, so reading, some common probes that we look at, be measuring reading fluency. Any of you on here tonight using a probe for fluency? Anybody doing a fluency probe? Debbie? She's raising her, okay. So there is a pretty neat little chart in here. I don't know, and I see Kenneth shaking your head. So the chart is a resource. It's listed, which I'm going to show you on here. It gives you some direction on fluency rates based on their grade level. Okay, most of these are going to be targeted at elementary, because a lot of schools really, once they get up into middle school, a lot of schools don't even do a reading class that's just specific reading. See it mainly in the lower elementary. Okay, and so we look at fluency probes, grade level passages. Okay, here basically your students are reading a passage for 1 minute while the teacher records errors on there. It's very common, very easy to do. So your metrics for that are your number of words read correctly per minute. You get an accuracy rate, which is a percentage. Okay, and you could even use a rubric on that. Another one that's common for reading is a comprehension. Okay, maze test. So I don't know if you're familiar or heard about a maze test, what that entails. Is anybody familiar with the maze test in reading? Yeah, okay. So basically, you're giving them a passage that contains missing words, and the student are going to select correct words to put in the blank where the word's missing. Okay, so they're reading along and it's going to have missing words, and so they're going to have to take the words that are provided and try to come up with a good contextual meaning to determine what word is appropriate to put where there's a missing word. Okay, that goes along with that story. So in gist, that's what a maze test is. And usually they're given a certain amount of time to do it. Those are common for comprehension. It's a chart that I'm referring to as a resource that you guys might want to go back and look at. It is recommended weekly growth for reading in words. So this could be like when we're looking at fluency rates. So here, as I mentioned, it really is specific to elementary, but it kind of gives you one, the grade level and the realistic growth rate. And then what that realistic growth rate is if the student is classified special services, what they are in general education settings, and then if they're really ambitious students and doing well, kind of what the recommended weekly growth as far as number of words. Okay, so this is a resource you might want to go back and look at. Excuse me. If you do and you think, hey, where do you pull that up at? Where do you get that? I'll just tell you, I took this, it's listed in week 3, chapter 6 PowerPoint in your course shell. Okay, so it's tied into the informal. So it's kind of this.
Is it in our textbook, chapter 6?
It should be. It should be in your
Okay.
class textbook. But yeah, for sure. That's where it's taken at. So anyway, if you're wanting a quick reference and you're digging through the course shell to save you some time, if you'll go to week 3, it's right in there connected with, it'll say informal, other informal measurements, and it's chapter 6 PowerPoint. But this resource, you'll see this chart. Okay, so if you have a textbook, it's in chapter 6. Okay, so determining progress in fluency. So we want to get a baseline. I think Debbie and Kenna both said they were doing fluency. So your first 2 kind of could be establishing your baseline. Okay, just to kind of make sure they're consistent. And then we're going to go from there and try to get 6 good data points. On your baseline, I will tell you, on your first 2 points that you put to establish your baseline, if it's going in a downward trend, before you go any further, you need to adjust it. That tells you right there that that is probably the level of difficulty for that grade level needs to be adjusted and dropped back. You can see that in your baseline. But on your baseline, your first 2 points, if you see an upward, you should be good to go and you can proceed forward. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, establish a goal and plot an aim line. So this is kind of where you're based on your baseline, what you're hoping that student will increase per week. So you can go back and look at that table as a reference that I just showed you to determine what you feel like is going to be a reasonable increase per week based on your baseline. Then you can multiply that weekly growth by the number of weeks and instruction they're going to follow. So this is another good resource for you guys moving forward after this class. If you decide, hey, I'm going to utilize CBMs to track growth of my students, and I'm going to do it over multiple weeks. Here's a little formula on how to calculate that or your aim line. So you're going to take your multiply your weekly growth by the number of weeks. So if it's a 2nd grade student and your baseline is 55, okay, minus your weekly increase, minus 25 weeks of school, gives you the formula to do that. I see how he did that, Debbie? See you shaking your head? Yeah. So again, if you decide, hey, I want to try this over a long stretch to get some good data points on my kiddos, or maybe you want to try it on one or two that are really a challenge and you want to track their growth, this is a good resource for you. So you have it as a formula so you can track it and calculate it. So again, the slide before has the recommended growth rates. Okay. And then the next slide gives you basically a little formula on how to go and calculate that. Debbie, I see you're taking pictures of it. Did you get them before I scroll it? Yeah. Okay. So determining progress and fluency. Again, the information on these slide decks is also written with the notion or the idea that it's going to be perhaps over a longer period of time. Okay, so remember that we're doing a condensed version in this class to kind of give you the gist of how to do it. But determining progress and fluency. So plot your data 1 or 2 times a week. Okay, I know we're condensing all this into just a couple, but if you use this later on down the road, these are the recommendations. Plot your data 1 to 2 times a week. If the student falls below that aim line that you've calculated on 3 to 4 consecutive
Right.
measures or 3 to 4 consecutive probes that you give them, hey, I need to adjust it. I've hit the threshold for that student where it's too difficult. I need to drop it back a little bit.
So if I did a reading today, and then I'm going to have her do a reading Friday morning. And if she goes lower, so then I'll go to the level before. She's at an O right now. I'd put her at an N.
Mhm.
And then, so do I need to get 6 more readings at that N?
No, you'll just progress from that point on, and you'll document
Okay.
you'll explain that in your report
Okay.
that on
Okay.
administering the third probe, the student continued a downward
Right.
trajectory. So part of the intervention was that you went in and dropped it back from a
Okay.
level O to a level N. So in the narrative part, that's where that comes in. You're explaining what you
Okay.
did up there in that graph. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes, because the only
Yeah.
thing is that our 5th graders are going to Starbase, not next week, but the following week. So I'm like I've got to get all these in. So I started today. And so I'm
Gotcha.
like,
Yeah, no, I totally have you.
because they're gone the whole week, then that first week, that last week of April.
Yeah. So we're talking about the trend line. You hear me talk about the trend line. We want to see that upward trajectory. You don't want to see it downward. So the trend line is showing kind of their average, whether it's average is lower, or upward. So you can talks about the Tukey method where you can divide your data points into thirds and you can find your overall median. So that's be a little bit somewhat challenging to do that with only 6. This really comes in handy if you're doing it over, multiple weeks, like the previous slide. If you were going to do it over 24 weeks. Okay, so that gives you an idea there, just if you decide to do it long term. Here's some things on comprehension. Anybody doing comprehension? No? These are just some suggestions on comprehension. We're talking about CBM. So appropriate grade level instructional passages, keep the first sentence intact. Maybe go in and delete every, third word or fourth or fifth, whatever it may be, and leave a blank in there. And then supply 3 words. So this is kind of that closed test method. So literally you could copy a passage out of their reading base or whatever, you could pull something off the internet and you literally could go in there and doctor that up and use whiteout or cover those words if you want to do every fourth or every fifth. And then for each blank, you have multiple choices, three choices for them to determine what's going to be the best fit to contextually make that a sensible reading that it all coordinates together. Okay. So Consider following criteria if you choose to do that. It's always interesting when you have students do it. I used to like to have fourth and fifth grade kids do that when I was doing elementary school. Okay. Some of them, you might want to throw in there that don't make contextual sense. Maybe words that not rhyme with the correct choice. Okay. Words that don't sound or look like their correct choice. You could those don't include any nonsense words. Don't require the students to read ahead to eliminate a choice. Okay. And should not be challenging in terms of the meaning. Okay. We're just trying to see if they can determine what goes in there. Very straightforward, basic. It's not meant to try to trip them up or trick them. Okay. Here's some of the things in spelling. I don't know if any of you are doing spelling, but it gives you some suggestions for spelling. Okay. Grade or instructional level words, 12 words for grades 1 through 3, 18 words is suggestion growth rate for grades 4 through 8. Okay, you could do correct letter sequences, 1 point for each 2 letters that are correct in the sequence. Okay, we're getting into a little bit of process of when we do some of the norm reference testing, WJ, where we have to go through there and score some things like this. So we're tracking each letter correctness there. So for example, the word time, T-I-M-M-E. So they got 5 correct sequences on that. So you can plot the number of correct letter sequences and the number of correctly spelled words. So spelling, you can get a little bit more in depth as far as how you plot it. Here's a weekly growth for spelling. Okay, so there are a couple of growth charts in there, not only for reading, but you see one now for spelling. So realistic growth rate, and if they're really ambitious. So grades 2 all the way up through 6. Okay. Anybody doing it in math? CBM and math? Here's some suggestions here. If you're a math person, you could have your probe or construct measures from grade or instructional level based on computational. Maybe have 25 problems. I referenced, I believe in a previous Zoom session about doing mad minutes. We used to do those a lot to check their fluency on math facts fluencies to help, especially with multiplication facts. Okay, mad minutes. You can give them their 1 minute. Get as many done as you can in 1 minute, whether it's multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, depending on the grade level. Okay, so you literally on that, you can go in there and score digits correct per minute. Maybe not necessarily correct problems. So here you see 2-digit numbers plus 2 digits. So 54 and 21. So the answer is 75. So they got 2 digits correct. So that's what we mean by we're scoring them on digits correct and not necessarily correct answer. That makes sense? So it gives you that. So then you can go and plot the number of digits correct per minute on your graph if you're wanting to do a CBM of math. Here is a chart for future reference if you ever decide to do math. Again, it's in your book. Recommended rate for grades 1 through 6 for math. Okay, per minute, digits correct per minute. Okay, so just a little bit about research on CBM. Seem to have a noticeable effect on their achievement when results are used to modify instructional planning. Okay, the whole purpose of this is to give you ongoing feedback on whether you need to go in and adjust your instruction. If you're doing it just to have data and then you're not doing anything on the instructional side, you're not doing any good for the student because they may need, they may need the level of instruction dropped, grade level content go down, and your data points are going to show you that. Okay. So it's a way data-driven instructions, all it is. It gives you real-time data that you're collecting, and it helps you make adjustments along the way. Okay, so that's really in a nutshell what that whole slide is about, how to use the data, how to change your instruction to help improve academic achievement of the overall student. And it helps you better prepare students for high stakes testing later on. I mean, it helps you adjust your instruction to help better prepare them for those, whether it's state test, whatever it may be for high stakes testing. So I just want to kind of go over those now. Yeah, after this on this slide deck, this particular reference that I told you I went back to pull talks a little bit about informal, and then CBM's in the middle. Then you get into criterion reference assessment a little bit later on, which we really don't get into a lot in this course, but it is a good slide deck. It's got some very good resources for you on there to reference. Is anybody having trouble deciding on what type of CBM to do? Are you having trouble locating any particular probes?
I was just gonna log on to Easy CBM. I'm doing math because, I'm different than everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, check that out. Some of you may have already started administering a probe. I don't know this. If you remember at the beginning of the course, I said, hey, about right now, you might want to go ahead in this overlap. This week is where it's happening at. That you might want to go ahead and start so you don't have to squeeze everything in just a short window of time. You've got some time to get multiple data points before this is due. So think about this. The normed reference report will be due this Sunday. Then you have 2 full weeks after that before the CBM is due. Okay. So you got a pretty good little window there. If at all possible, and you have your probe picked out, I would encourage you maybe to go ahead and administer some of those. Start it off. This is Wednesday. You had it. You might want to try one on Friday.
I
Take
did
you
one
less-
I did one this morning.
Yeah, and that's
I did
fine.
my
It probably
first one.
takes less than 5 minutes, correct?
Yeah, I had to read for 1 minute.
Yeah. So that way you're spreading it out over time. It's not all clumped into a 3 or 4 day period. And we're trying to get all these data points. Try to go ahead and do it now. You can do it in just a few minutes. You're done. You're out of the way. You got it. Okay.
Yeah,
So
we
try
had
to
this-
spread that out. Excuse me?
We had state assessments and then we went straight into Fast Bridge this week. And so, yeah, I plan on doing this Fast Bridge tomorrow and I was gonna start a CBM on Friday, so.
Yeah, maybe
Hopefully
give
that's
them a
gonna work.
probe, set them down, say, hey, can you do this for me, and you could even make it kind of like a game, say, I'm trying to get some information here. I mean, literally, depending on the probe, turnkey from start to end and all that, it should be 5 minutes or less, and you're done, and they're on their way.
Right, and that's
Okay.
what he needs,
Yeah,
5 minutes or less.
exactly. Just make sure you keep track of the dates you administer it and all that, so you can, put it into your report, and it'll help you understand, hey, I gave it, it's spread out over 14 days, and you know exactly what day you gave it. It's also interesting too, guys. We'll kind of digging in a little bit deeper, but it'll be interesting to go back and say, if I gave it on Friday or a Monday or a Wednesday or Thursday,
Yes.
and look, on Friday, the score drop. Was he at the end of the week? Was he, where they just shot, they're exhausted, and they came back and gave one on a Monday, did the score go up because they're well rested? I mean, there's all kinds of variables in there.
With
So it's-
Fast Bridge, I found out that doing it first thing Monday morning was no good.
Yeah. May not be. They may be coming back off a weekend and they've
Yeah.
been, up long. Might want to do it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday after they
Yeah.
kind of get back into the groove again. So timing when you do assessments I think it's an important factor. I really
Yes.
do.
Monday morning is a no-go.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to go in as an examiner and go in on a Friday afternoon and try to do it.
You don't want to do that either.
So, yeah, try to do them. I always like to try to schedule them myself if I'm going into as a contractor to do that testing, maybe a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday,
Yeah.
preferably in the morning.
Yes.
But just me.
Yes.
Any questions on CBM? I know we went from one, the normed at the beginning of the class, rolled over and talked a little bit about CBM, and next week I'll pull up a sample copy of the CBM report. to show you what that graph looks like, where you go in there and plug in your data points, because it is a little bit different type of graph,
Right.
and show you how other students have done that as an example for you. And we'll talk through that, but I'll pull it up on the screen and we'll talk through it next week.
Okay.
Okay, on Wednesday. I just kind of wanted to get into the overview of it tonight. I know you're finishing up the norm, but I also wanted you kind of get started thinking about that so you'd have plenty of time to get your data points. Okay, so really, by the time that's due from tonight, you got a good 2.5, solid 2.5 weeks on that. So again, I would encourage you, if at all possible, to go ahead and start giving some of those to spread them out.
Mhm.
Okay. I will go into and add the bell curve resource that I mentioned to you. You know,
Wow.
if you take a look at that, I'll get that downloaded and copied over into the resources folder for you guys to use on that. You
Okay.
may have to change the heading on there, you know, because it's already got the heading for like the WJ4. So you might want to put, you know, if it's a different assessment you use, and
Okay.
knocker it up a little bit, but it will plot the information you put in up above in that bell curve.
Okay.
Yep. Any
And we'll
questions?
be able to download it right off the resource page?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All it is, you can download it, and then actually you can download it, and then I would advise you maybe to save it
In my
over
Google,
into your Google, and that way you'll have it as a future reference. I
right,
mean, it always come in
right,
handy for something you're doing.
definitely.
But
Okay,
it's a good little tool. So yeah,
okay.
right. Any questions before we go?
I think I'm good.
Everyone good?
Mhm.
Something comes up between now and when it's due Sunday, please email me and let me know. If you're really hitting a roadblock and we need to connect, do a quick Zoom, I'm good doing that. You just email me and let me know, and we'll try to set a time to do it, okay?
Okay.
All right, guys, good luck on that. Again, email if you have questions, and we'll get through it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dr. Posey.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.